Esta es la ven que tomamos para el día de los mercados que se va a Milwaukee. Como pueden ver, ahorita está lleno de productos, pero es como se va ahorita. Tenemos cajas de CSA members, tenemos pollos también que se van a Milwaukee. Tenemos las cajas de CSA. Y por aquí, por este lado, tenemos todo el brócoli que se va a los pedidos, las bruselas. Todo esto tiene que ser entregado hoy mismo en el mercado de Milwaukee. Y hay otro pedido que se llama Warehouse, que también le hacemos un entrego. Ya está todo empacado aquí, listo para irse. Esa es la ven que se ocupa para ir al mercado. Y por este lado está la empacadora, donde tomamos los productos que se van directamente al mercado. Ahora les enseño. Esto se hace jueves y viernes. Para el sábado en la mañana, dejar todo cargado para irnos temprano a las 5:30 de la mañana. Ahora vamos a venir por acá y está la empacadora. Aquí es la empacadora. Esa camioneta también se tiene que ir a un mercado ahorita. Como pueden ver, la ven estaba llena y no se pudo meter todo. Esto de aquí es la empacadora. Todo esto es donde se arregla todo para el mercado. Todos los productos que traemos del terreno se lavan aquí, en estos dos tanques. Aquellos son parte del grupo. Y aquí es el refrigerador, donde acomodamos y empacamos y guardamos todos los productos. Aquí están las bruselas que se tienen que limpiar también. De este lado tenemos papa roja, papa amarilla. Aquí tenemos arúgula, que esto va directamente al mercado de mañana. Necesitamos cubrirlas porque se secan. De este lado tenemos más bruselas. Por aquí tenemos los Hacker Rice Turnips, que de hecho son bastante buenos. Igual se cubre todo con bolsa por mantener la humedad. Celerias. Muy bueno para las sopas, buenísimo, también se cubre. De este lado tenemos cebolla. La cebolla hay que limpiarla también, de hecho se va al mercado. Esto de aquí es el green kale. Muy buena de hecho también. Una parte se mantiene tapado igual. Por aquí tenemos Apollo Rabbit. Es por storage too. Puedo escribir por winter. Un poco más de CSA. Para los miembros de CSA tenemos estas cajas que son los que van a venir a recoger al mercado hoy en la granja. Por aquí tenemos las leaks. Las leaks también necesitan limpiarse, lavarse y encajarlas. Carro de farmer. Y eso es todo por hoy. Gracias.
Ok, Okay, behind me is our broccoli planting 11 and 12. These are our last broccoli plantings. Planting 12, hopefully we'll get something in November. 11 we're going to finish up today, back behind us. So this is the view you get of the farm when you come right into the farm on the driveway. What's unusual about these fields right here is that they are all square. Most of my fields are not square. The reason these could be square is because the field told me we can be square and we're not going to wash away on you. The rest of the farm pretty much is not square. So here's kind of a picture of our farm map. And I had some visitors from Willie Street Co-op the other day, and one of the people was saying, gee, that looks like a soils map. And it probably does to a little bit, because we have some different types of soils on the farm, and we treat them all differently because they cannot be treated the same. The land tells us how to react to it. Before this, the whole farm had been planted all let's see, the entire farm was planted north-south before we were on this farm, and the first several years we were here when it was being cropped, when we started off with just like the first year a 1/4 acre and then 2 acres, and we just kind of kept increasing until we took over the whole farm. But we changed things around based on what the soil told us to do. The other thing about this broccoli crop is this broccoli crop didn't get here just by itself. And what I mean like that, well, of course we planted and cultivated and all that kind of stuff. But these broccoli fields right here, this spring, they were planted to oats. We let the oat crop get up about to the point where it's just about heading. We chopped that up and then we mixed that into the soil with our rotavator, which is like a great big garden tiller, only it's 9 feet wide, that goes on the back of my big tractor. Then after that we started prepping it so that we could plant broccoli in it. This year all my broccoli fields, with the exception of one, have either had a cover crop before broccoli or after the broccoli crop, and a couple of them had 2. So out of the 12 plantings, all but one had at least a cover crop before or after it was planted. We're going to take a look at some of the cover crops that we have out here and talk a little bit about why we do cover cropping and why we make odd-shaped fields. Okay, when we bought our farm, like I said, the entire farm was one big field planted north to south, all the rows same direction. We'll talk about it later, but we have 3 creeks that run through the farm. Mostly they're called drainage ditches, but they really go into the Manashaw River, which goes through Deansville Marsh into the crawfish. Some of the first things we did on the farm is we put in, behind me you can see one of the tree lines that we put in. We put in 4 or 5 different tree lines on the farm to get some wind breakage, because we're very open here on the prairie. The other thing we did is on all of those creeks that go through here, we seeded down 100 feet on each side of them, and then at the same time we started putting waterways back in the farm, back where they belong, where they disappeared over the ages, trying to get it back. Soil conservation is very, very important to me. Of all the things, you know, everybody knows I love broccoli, but actually the thing I'm most proud of on this farm isn't my nice broccoli, it's what we're doing to the fields on this farm and the changes in the soil that have happened since we purchased this farm. I could go on for hours about that, how unbelievable it is, the change in the quality of the soil since we started here. But cover cropping is a really big part of that. From this tree line, let's go over and we'll talk a little bit about some fields then. Okay, right behind us are some oats that we put in. What we do after the broccoli, let's see, this is behind me right now is broccoli 4 and 5. Behind the hill, you can't see it, is broccoli 1 and 2. As soon as we're done cutting a crop, we go in and mow it off. The reason we mow it off is actually threefold. The first reason is We want to get rid of that so pests don't have a place to lay eggs in and breed, and I'm certainly not going to spray a field that doesn't have a crop in it. The second one is once the crop is done, the plants really start rotting down, and I don't want to be generating a disease problem. And then the third one, of course, is so that we can get back on that field and get it into a cover crop. So these oat fields behind us, they're going to stay like this until next spring, so there's going to be cover on the field over the winter to keep the soil from moving. The other thing we've basically done, one of my soils consultants always says what you need to do in the fall is you've got to feed your earthworms and put a roof over their head. So the feeding part comes in, we take that crop that was there and we chop it up fresh and we immediately mix it into the soil. Okay, that is their food. Then we put the roof over their head, which is, in this case, is the oats. And what that will do is that will keep the frost from, not necessarily keep the frost from going down so far, but you won't get those, the frost won't penetrate into the ground as quickly. And so it is going to help to protect the earthworms, so because what happens when the soil freezes, they go down below the soil, in the soil below the frost line. And then the other thing is these crops are capturing any of the nutrients left over in the field, tying it up into organic matter, which is then going to be broken down and feed the crop next year. Actually, what will happen on the fields behind us, we'll have a series of different pasture crops we're going to plant in here. This will be chicken pasture next year, and then after that we'll rotate back into vegetable crops again. The reason these fields are all at an angle like this is because that's what the field told us to do. It's sloping. You can see how it slopes from the top down. Prior to this, all the rows were going straight back from me straight back to the trees behind us. So you can see there's a lot of potential for soil loss, soil erosion in that case. What we have is we have strips that are 66 feet wide. That gives me 10 or 11 beds in a field. Then we have a buffer strip here that we also use to drive on to harvest. And that way, if we do have any soil movement, it's going to be caught by these strips. From there, everything goes into, you can see some waterways. There's one that starts up by this white barrel, goes down past that grain drill, goes down, and then you can see there, and it heads down to the creek. It was a really interesting story. We had a SCS person out here when we first did this, when we first seeded down that waterway to see if there was any cost sharing available in it. And he about had a fit that we put that waterway in there. After all, how did you know where that waterway is going to go? And I says, well, basically, I started at the bottom of the hill and I walked up the washout and put flags in it, so I knew pretty well where it was going to go. At that time, it was no-till corn in here, so, you know, the farmer that was renting at the time thought, well, I can just go right straight through with no-till corn. It's not going to wash, but that is a myth. Really good view of all these fields. This is my favorite view of the farm. I want to put a deck out here in case, like, oh, we never use the deck, and it's like, I would. I'm sure I'd use this deck. We're facing southwest right now, or actually south-southwest, something like that. But you can see the difference on up to the left here, the fields that are all at an angle. You can see they're at an angle because of the hill that's there. Then if you pan down into the low area, that's all very flat. So in that case, we can run the fields north and south, but they're different lengths though, based on the waterway on this end, the berm up on the other end, and if we were to see over the hill on the other side of the creek, I don't think we can see it from here. That's the field. Those fields wrap completely around that hill to keep the soil from washing. The fields, oh, I didn't say this while we were out there, these fields that are real short and green there, That is rye and vetch. That was planted later. That will overwinter. The oats will die during the winter. The rye and vetch will live through the entire winter. Then they'll grow up next spring, and we'll let them grow till probably sometime in June. We'll chop them up and till them so that we can plant in July or August. So sometime in June or July, we'll start prepping the fields, and then July or August we'll plant those fields.